So, for those who haven't encountered your work, perhaps you could just give us a brief summary of who you are, what you do.
So the Insecurity Project is my thing. Now, it's problematic from the start because people are insecure about being insecure. But nevertheless, it is a problem that so many people suffer with. And I have a real engineering bent to the way I see the world. I love systems thinking. I love structure. And in my own journey of becoming me, I had to encounter and overcome a whole bunch of insecurity. And so my quest was, is there a solution to this problem, or the common wisdom is that we just manage it? Is that all we can do? So thankfully I discovered that there was a solution. It just hadn't been modeled. And so that's what I set myself to do firstly for my own problem solving. What is the path to come out the other side of this? And then it made so much sense to me and changed my life so dramatically that I was ruined for anything else. And so out of the overflow of that, I've devoted my best adult thinking to treating insecurity like an engineering problem. And I'm sure that not only can you eradicate it, I think you must. I think it's actually your most important adult work to free yourself completely from the limiting beliefs formed in your childhood.
Absolutely. Perhaps for those who are wondering, what is insecurity? We all kind of get a sense of, you've had those moments where you feel like, oh, I'm not good enough. I'm not sure that I can take that next step or whatever. What is the real definition of insecurity?
And this is the funny part of it because, when a person encounters my world of insecurity and they think, I'm not insecure, and then they watch a bit longer and go, hang on, maybe I am, and then they begin a process of uncovering what it is, no one actually knows. They assume it's some kind of fear, but fear of what? Maybe it's fear of failure, maybe it's the fear of rejection, maybe it's the fear of other people's opinions or judgment. It's all very abstract. But Yoda's wisdom is very apt here. Named must your fear be before banish it you can. So if you're going to solve it, you've got to know what it is you're dealing with. So if you think this through, no one is actually afraid of failing and no one is afraid of being rejected. It's just the level beneath that. If I was to try my best and my best not be enough and then I fail, well, then you see me. You see the inadequacy in me, like I've just been exposed. And so I'm afraid of the personal implications of failure. The same as rejection. No one's afraid of being rejected. They're afraid of, if I try my best and my best isn't enough and I am rejected by those I wanted to be accepted by, well, what does that reveal about me? Now you see my inadequacy. And so it turns out the most precise definition of insecurity is that we're actually most afraid of our own worst opinion of ourselves being confirmed by the world. I'm more worried about what I think about me than what you think about me. I just don't want you to align with me. So insecurity at its core is an opinion problem, which is funny, right? Because it doesn't seem like that. It seems far bigger, but that is the nature of fear. Fear unexamined grows. Jordan Peterson, 12 Rules for Life. Rule 10, be precise in your speech. Things that go unnamed become monsters that consume you. So most people's experience with insecurity is of a monster. When you have a look at it, it's never a monster. It's just the idea of a monster. And that idea is an opinion. And even more exciting is it's a childhood opinion. So you are most afraid of the worst opinion you formed about yourself before you were 7, probably before you were 4. That's it in a nutshell.
That's interesting because often we would associate insecurity with that social anxiety. I've been there before. I've been at a conference and afterwards I've got to have conversations with people. I mean, I'm okay speaking on the stage, no problem. But now small talk, I remember going into the bathrooms and breathing my way to calm and going, okay. I mean, that's symptomatic of some version of insecurity, right?
Well, it is, because it's like, what if I don't get it right? And then they see that I'm not as smart as I thought they think I was, or they see who I really am. Then I'm exposed. Then the thing I think is wrong with me is now made clear to the world. So it's very useful to know that the problem's not out there, because if it's out there, if my problem is with what other people think about me, I've got to fix what every single person thinks about me. But if the problem's just what I think about me, then I've only got to fix one problem, one opinion, and that's my own. Okay, that's already, we're in the realm of a solvable problem now.
So you mentioned that it starts in childhood, and I'd love to dive a little deeper. Where and how?
Yeah, so all the science around belief structure is by the time we're 7, we've made up our mind about almost everything about ourselves and our world, and then we form a bias that is then confirmed. But if you go back to the start, which I think is very important to do, an infant has a very high sense of self, as evidenced by the moment something is less than perfect in their world. What do? They demand it be resolved. They're tired, they're wet, they're hungry, they need food, they need something. They're not questioning, have I used up my allotted number of requests for the day? Are my parents busy or tired? It's like, hey, I am a very important person, and I'm not contributing to this world at all. I am a complete consumer, but you all exist for me. So I am very enough. Like, that is my only possible conclusion about my essence, that I am more than enough. And not because of what I do, just because of who I am. So that is the beginning. Everyone starts there. How long you keep it is up for grabs, but everybody starts there. So the fun of being a human, though, is that we're not animals. Like, I got a Labrador who loves going for a walk. She's very happy if I take her for a walk. But if I don't take her for a walk, she's very sad. But then the next day I take her for a walk again and she's happy again. She doesn't have an existential crisis in the meantime. Look into a water bowl going, is it me? Am I a bad dog? You know, if I had better breath, would I get more walks? She's just like, I don't know. I got a walk and then I didn't. I'm happy, then I'm sad and I'm happy. But humans, being conscious, we are sense-making creatures. So we go into the world and we have experiences, but we have to decide what those experiences mean. And so it's problematic getting consciousness turned on somewhere around 2, being in an adult world and having to make sense of it. And so inevitably a child goes from this place of being assured they are enough to having an incident happen in their childhood that's upsetting or surprising or distressing or embarrassing, and they have to make sense of it with 2 primary questions. Question 1, why did this happen? Question 2, what does it mean about me? They're the most important questions that frame the map of reality for a child. And so it would be impossible for a child to have enough emotional intelligence or objectivity to accurately answer those questions. They answer them from their own map of the world, and it seems like the reason they didn't get invited to the party, or the reason why this kid got a bike and they didn't get a bike, or, you know, their parents are staying together, my parents are divorced, or, you know, they've got money, we don't have money. Well, it seems like that's about me. And so a child implicates themselves and assumes the worst. They think, well, the reason this is happening is a reflection of me, and I'm not anywhere near as enough as I thought I was. And they form an opinion about their own lack. And then they look around and think, I think I'm right too. And so they lock it in. And it goes from an opinion to an accusation, which is this, you know, where the real me separates from the ideal me. The ideal me looks down and says, you are the problem. You are the reason why your world's not working out. So don't be you anymore. You know, be better than you, be different than you, be other than you. And that begins this process of then trying to prove and defend yourself, often for the rest of your life, all based on this childhood experience of disappointment, upset. And often it's only little things that trigger you. It doesn't need to be something big. You know, everything's big for a child. But yeah, that's the origin of all insecurity.
So I've heard you speak about the fact that a single moment of misunderstanding can really shape an entire person's life story. Perhaps you could unpack that a little bit for us.
Yeah, well, when I, you know, paint this picture that you're going to have to go back into your past, no one wants to. They're like, man, like surely the past is the past. It is what it is. You can't go back there. And so many people say, and I don't even remember my childhood, so that's going to be problematic if we've got to go looking for a single moment in time where this started. I don't know that I'll find it. But it's always there. It's the very foundation of how you become you, and what you've done has pivoted off this moment in time. So I'm absolutely convinced all my work has pointed to the fact that there is a moment in time where the very first time you went from being relaxed and at ease to assuming that there was a problem with you, and deciding, well, if there's a problem with me, I can no longer be relaxed and at ease. I need to be guarded. There's a problem, and I cannot afford for anyone else to see the truth about me from this moment. So it's a single moment in time, because it's the very first time you get disappointed. You've gone for the first 2 or 3 years in your life never being disappointed. You've never heard no. Every time you've had a need, someone's met it. Very first time you have a need and no one meets it. It's like, what's up with that? What are you supposed to do with that? It's a surprise to you. You didn't see it coming. One of my clients, it was the very first time she got asked to do chores. She's like, wait, what? I got to do something? I didn't know that was coming. I just thought I was just going to be loved and looked after because I was me. You're telling me I've got to perform, I've got to earn, I've got to do something to be loved now? Holy shit, like that's a disaster. I can't keep up with that. And you're like, oh, that's such an innocuous experience. How would a parent ever prevent this happening? Well, they can't and they wouldn't. That's kind of another point. But yeah, children have these surprising moments where their map of the world is challenged, and they, in order to make sense of it, they implicate themselves in that process. And there is the very first time that happens. And it is catastrophic, no matter how you would define it as an adult. Like, it doesn't have to be abuse. It doesn't have to be someone dying. It doesn't have to be a car accident. It can be you wanted your mum to cut your honey sandwich in triangles and she cut it in squares. And you had an existential crisis because it's like, I only wanted one thing in the entire world and I couldn't get that. Turns out no one even loves me. That is unpreventable. That every child is going to have an experience like that. And insecurity is inevitable.
Yeah, that's interesting. And of course, it could come from a moment where someone really does attack you or says, you're just a loser. You have a teacher who, I had a teacher who used to tell us, you are worse than shark poo at the bottom of the ocean. You are an oxygen thief. And, you know, it was funny, but some of the kids probably believed her.
Well, this is the fun of it. Don Miguel Ruiz, have you read The Four Agreements?
I've got it on audiobook now, yeah.
It's just, I'm sure the subtitle is true. This is a book of wisdom. But he says something that changed my life in understanding the structure of this. And he says, look, you're going to think it's the words spoken to you or about you that change your lives. It's actually not. The words themselves have no power outside of your agreement. So it's not the words, it's just the ones you agree with. Because if it was just the words, and every negative word spoken to you would ruin your life, but every positive word spoken to you would heal you. So clearly that's not how it works. You know, your mum says, oh, you're awesome, I think you can do anything. And you go, it's just my mum. But your dad says, you know, geez, you're so annoying. You know, I wish you were never born. You go, oh my goodness, you know, I'm worthless. And so it's just really breaking through the misdirection of what it is that ruins our life and seeing that we're not the actor in the story, we're the storyteller. Like, we're the one doing the agreeing or disagreeing. And not to blame us, but just to highlight the exact mechanics of what it is that created insecurity in the first place. Because if I agreed, well then we've just preempted the solution. I could disagree. I could go back and review that data and change my mind.
And if we don't resolve this, and we'll talk about that in a minute and we'll talk about your book, but how does this play out across a person's lifetime? Is it just fear, I can't try that passion project because I'm a failure, or I won't even write that book because I'm useless, or I won't go on that date because I'm ugly? Those are the types of things that play out.
You'd think so, but insecurity has advantages in some seasons of life. And this was a game changer for me too in my research. I used to be on a mission to eradicate all insecurity, and then I heard myself say that one day. I'm like, boy, you know, no one wants to hear someone on a mission to do something. You know you're about to be preached at. But I kind of realized that insecurity is like rocket fuel in certain seasons. Like, so many people do their best work motivated by needing to prove and defend themselves. Like, their school teacher said, you'll never amount to anything. And so they've been so driven ever since to go, right, I'll show you. And it's this motivation that has no boundaries, no barriers, doesn't even understand the word no. It's just like, I will do whatever it takes to prove a person who said I was no good wrong. I think the most outstanding sports stars are all driven by unresolved insecurity. It causes them to perform at elite levels. I don't know if you've seen The Last Dance, Michael Jordan's story, but he had to make up stories of people attacking him, even if it wasn't true. So he had someone to fight against, someone to overcome. So, yeah, so I just love going, let's not say insecurity is bad. Let's just say it's inevitable and it's useful for a season. However, if you're still using all your best energy to prove and defend yourself beyond midlife, you're now the insecure wanker in the room. And it's hard to watch. And I promise you, it's not high performance. It's weakening you to the point of madness. So insecurity, to answer your question, can show up as rocket fuel, and it often does in 20s and 30s. But it also weakens you and undermines you. It's this hypervigilance around being needy, having to always have people speak well of you, worrying what everyone's thinking about you. You know, feeling exposed, feeling like if I try this and it doesn't work, then people are going to know who I am. And so there's so much wasted energy that does really weaken you. And often people in midlife have really ground to a halt. They're paralyzed. This book's inside them. They can't get it out. This business idea, they're floundering. Their motivations drop. Their health is suffering. All of this is coming home to roost. This unresolved insecurity that was useful for a season is now really getting in the way.
So you can harness that for a season. I like that idea, especially when you're a little bit younger and you've got something to prove and you're developing those skills or whatever it is. Because I felt that very strongly for seasons of my life. But at a certain point, you probably don't want to continue on, driven only by that.
I think my most important diagram in the book is the relationship between insecurity and performance as we age. And it just highlights this rocket fuel early on, but by midlife it has passed the point of maximum return, and now it is weakening you. And so people who really do their best work do so having nothing to prove and defend. It's out of the overflow of, like, I know I'm a good person. I don't need you to like me. I'm free to contribute, solve problems, add value, not because of how it rewards me, because it would be unkind not to.
Very interesting twist. Yeah.
I get invited to talk to schools all the time about insecurity, and teachers are very excited. They're like, oh, if I knew this when I was, and parents are very excited. Do you know who's not excited? 16, 17, 18-year-olds. They're little shits, and they're not ready for wisdom yet.
No.
And it's like, and it's still working. So it was a big point of discovery for me to go, stop talking to people until the curve has peaked, and then insecurity is now destroying them. So, that's been a lot of fun for me, just to wait till the pain stacks up. And that's how it works. No one calls me because things are awesome. People call me because they're in trouble, and their marriage is falling apart, their health is deteriorating, their anxiety is increasing, their neediness is manifesting. It's all the stuff that's the dysfunctional side of insecurity is now really getting in the way.
I don't like to blame technology for things, but do you think that because we're using it right now, whoever's watching is watching on it, but do you think that we'll see a more insecure generation as people compare themselves to social media?
I don't know that we'll see a more insecure generation. I think every generation it's unavoidable. It's an essential part of what it means to be alive. I think what we're just seeing is just the feedback loop is much more visible and faster. So it's more apparent. You see it more clearly. But I don't actually think it's greater. I think it's just a part of the challenge of being alive is, who am I and am I enough? And every person who's ever lived, like, no one has survived their childhood without assuming there's a problem with them. Not a single person has ever lived who's made it to 7 still being absolutely relaxed and at ease in their own skin.
And as you said, many of the highest performers, whether it's an actor or a sports star, they've usually overcome the greatest obstacles in terms of insecurity. They were told that they would never be able to do it, or whatever else might have happened, traumatic events, and yet they pushed themselves to get there.
So let's be pragmatic about it. Let's not say it's good or bad, right or wrong. Let's say it's inevitable and it's useful. But at some point, the usefulness will deteriorate, and now it will be a descent into madness. And there's no other way of describing it. If all your best energy is directed to prove and defend yourself, and you don't have the energy of youth anymore, it will weaken you to the point of madness. It will ruin your life. And we all know people who are advanced in life, and you're not having rational conversations with them. You are talking face to face with their insecurity. They have been consumed with this obsession to run and hide and prove and defend. There's got to be a better way of finishing the race than being destroyed by your fears.
Yeah, it is really sad. And you do get a sense for it. You're right. In that boardroom, or even with a family member who's just, trying, and it becomes quite raw in a way. And when you've advanced beyond your own, although they're always there, and we'll talk about that in a moment, but I think that they find it even more challenging that you're so grounded in who you are.
I agree, absolutely.
So time doesn't necessarily heal it. It doesn't fade away with age or success. It just gets more sophisticated.
Yeah, and more destructive. I think that if you can notice that the energy you have as a young person, you don't have to be efficient. You can steal from Peter and pay Paul. You can ignore all the natural boundaries of your energy levels. You can smash Red Bulls, you can pull all-nighters, you can fight and force yourself, all motivated by this rocket fuel of insecurity. But there comes a point where you pay the price for that. You reach a burnout or a breakdown, you're physically exhausted, you cannot keep up that energy that's being driven by insecurity. And so if you keep fighting it and still like this desperation to just work harder and be better, go back into this discipline and fighting yourself, it just looks so horrific. So yeah, time doesn't solve it, it makes it worse. And there comes a point where I think it's too late, where it's like people have so embedded themselves in this narrative about who they are and built this persona to try and hide behind. And they're not changing. They're 60 years of living this way. It's actually too late now. They're going out this way.
Yeah, no amount of, well, you never say never.
Yes,
You
of
could go
course.
and live in a monastery for 6 years and come back quite changed, perhaps, or go to the jungles of Peru and get up to whatever. And maybe, but you're right. Habits are pretty much ingrained by, what would you say, 50, 55, 60?
Well, I like to define them as strategies better than habits.
Okay.
That's the coach in me moving people away from being at effect to being at cause. A habit kind of is an abstraction. It's happening to me. But if you look closely, what's actually happened is a person has accused themselves of being inadequate as a child and then built a strategy to make sure that no one else knows that. And that strategy becomes their persona, and it looks like a habit because that's what they do, but it's actually, there was an intention behind it and they created it. So when you can see that again, it's like, well, if I created this strategy to solve a problem, what if I was to go back and realize the very need for this problem but to be solved in the first place is built on a misunderstanding? I could change that and build a new strategy. So,
Is people pleasing a form of insecurity?
well, of course, absolutely, because it's the strategy to, if you like me, then I'm a good person. I don't think like I'm actually afraid that if laid bare, completely scrutinized, you'd find I'm not actually all good. So my strategy to have you under the illusion that I'm good is for you to like me. And so I'll do everything I can to please you, so you'll constantly tell me and others I'm a good person. That's, of course, that's pure insecurity.
Sorry, we had a little glitch in Riverside for a moment. Did you see that?
I did. Got you back again now.
Yeah, good. I think I'm not sure if it finished recording that end bit about is people pleasing a form of insecurity. Should we
Should I
just do
answer
that
that
one
question
again?
again?
Let's just do that one again, yeah.
Yeah, people pleasing is classic insecurity. And if you try and solve it as a people pleasing problem, it's impossible. I'm going to stop trying to please people. Okay, good luck with that, because your whole strategy for proving you're a good person is to have others like you, because you don't know that you're a good person. So you can't afford to stop this strategy of doing everything to keep others happy. That's how you protect yourself. So yeah, classic insecurity. If you are afraid that if completely laid bare and scrutinized, people would see the real you, that's not likable and not good. So you are always performing, always going above and beyond, always saying yes when you want to say no, so that others will speak well of you to you and to other people.
I kind of touch on this in my book, Start With Values, where I talk about, are you living someone else's values? In which case, perhaps you're feeling a level of distress because you're not doing what's authentically you, but also that kind of resentment that starts to bubble up, but you don't display it. It's inside. Maybe your family gets to see it. But it's, again, the root of that is that insecurity. Confident enough to set a boundary or stand in my own power and say, this is how I want the situation to unfold. So you just say yes and yes and yes, and eventually maybe have a breakdown.
Yeah, that's how it ends up. Exactly.
So you talk about the moment of freedom in your book, Unhindered. You say change happens in a moment. What creates that moment?
It's so different than the personal development language typical. It's that I'm slowly, over time, incrementally making changes and learning to love myself. It's so self-deceptive, because when you see that the structure of insecurity, all insecurity is built on a single accusation that you made against yourself in a single moment of time, well, then the solution becomes very binary. It's like, well, did you get it right or not? Like, you're going to have to go back and review the data. That is your hero's journey, to go back to the beginning and examine your own assessment of you. Now, you're not insecure because your uncle said you were stupid. You're insecure because when he said that, you in your sense making went, well, I think he must be right. You agreed. So, okay, did you get it right or not? Is your assessment accurate? And with courage and kindness, if you do go back to that moment and examine all the data and find that there is no truth to that, there's never been any truth to that. You've just lived as though it is true and it's become true. But when laid bare, it's not true. Then you can completely change your mind about it. Just like a cold case, just like someone who'd been accused of a crime had been in prison for 30 years and a pro bono lawyer catches wind of it and goes back and opens the case and there's a retrial and the judge goes, new evidence, you're not guilty, you can go. Like that is a moment in time where everything has changed. That is how insecurity works. And in the same way, that's our job, to create that moment of freedom and then to see the real truth about ourselves, to go, okay, well, if that old accusation and opinion isn't true, well, then who am I really? And the you you've always been, the you that you've put out in the cold and shunned, now you can form a relationship with the best of you again and build a life off the back of that truth. So yeah, it may take a long time coming, but that is a moment in time where everything has changed.
And do you need to deliberately create the conditions for that moment? How would you recommend someone unpacks these events and looks at them from a new perspective?
Well, there are 7 essential practices for overcoming insecurity, and we've got limited time to talk through the whole process, but everything changes the moment that you understand what it is that has been driving you. When you realize that underneath all your struggle and all your rocket fuel and like all the stuff is this accusation that you made against you, well then the path to healing becomes apparent. Eventually, when I'm ready, if I'm ever ready, then I would have to go back to my childhood and reparent myself, to examine that, to open the file. It might sound abstract and people are like, I don't know where that moment would be. How would I find it? And yet it is stored so precisely. And if you would imagine it personally, like someone has been accused of a crime, well, they know exactly when that moment was, and they're desperate for someone to come and listen to them to clear their name. And so if you could treat yourself that personally, well then, as soon as you are ready to go back and review, you will find with 100% certainty that memory is stored there so precisely, with all the color, with all the sound, with all the emotion. You've just been afraid of looking at it. And so it's been hidden under the stairs, in a filing cabinet marked top secret, guarded by 2 bodyguards, so that you don't find it, so that you don't confirm your worst suspicion about yourselves. So as abstract as it might sound, it is all about readiness. Are you ready? Are you ready to be the hero in your own life and go on a journey of adventure back to the beginning to find out who you really are? Which is every hero. You got to go do the thing you can't. Joseph Campbell says that the treasure you seek is in the cave that you fear. So it's a journey into pain and fear. It's a journey into the thing that you think you can't do. No other way around it.
Interestingly, most people do everything they can to avoid that particular journey because it's going to be painful.
Of course, and people say it to me all the time, surely, Jaemin, we don't have to go back. And I say, no, you're right. And I never take people back into their past, except where it's necessary. And it's always bloody necessary. So yeah, strap in. Of course, your whole world is based on a structure that you created about you, and you don't want to have a look at it. Just think about any other operating system that you depend upon. Imagine still running your iPhone off an operating system you had in your iPhone 3. Why would you imagine that could operate in today's complexity? You would need to update it, review it, improve it. So you're telling me you created a structure about who you are before you were 7 and you don't want to examine it? You think you got it right? You didn't get it right. No one gets it right. So that is the best use of your adult skills, is to go back and improve the story you told about you. It seems so logical, but you're right. It's so terrifying, and so it's existential angst. Yeah, but what if I go back and find out I got it right? I've lived as though I'm right. I've got all this evidence that I'm right. I can see there's a problem with me. Look at my behavior. Look at how others treat me. Clearly there's something really messed up with me. If I go back into that cave, I'm going to find the thing and then I'll die. It'll be all over.
Now, you've coached many, many people, including leaders and high-profile individuals. Perhaps you could share a story of how using this approach helped someone, especially as they enter middle age and beyond, where you should no longer be holding on to these insecurities.
Yeah, well, it's extraordinary what becomes apparent when you watch someone who is achieving great things driven by their insecurity, and they're exhausted. They know they're coming to the end of their ability to keep that up, and so they're willing to examine the essence of how they've been themselves. So I was working with someone recently, and they had such a fear of abandonment, such a fear that people wouldn't like them if they actually were themselves. So they were always obsessing about pleasing people, always worried about what they would think. So as a leader of an organization, it ends up being lowest common denominator leadership all the time. You're always trying to keep everyone happy, because if I was to actually say what I wanted, then people would abandon me. And so we're like, okay, well, where did that come from? When was the very first time that you decided that you weren't worth loving for you. And of course, he doesn't know. It's not apparent. That memory's hidden somewhere, but I'm inexorable. It's there if you're willing. Let's go find it. And so, sure enough, this memory pops up. And he remembers being on a family holiday. He was the youngest of 3 children, the 4-year-old baby. They arrive at this destination that he's never been to before, and the other siblings are out playing, but he's got to have a nap. And so he fights it, but it's no good. He's got to have the nap. When he wakes up late in the afternoon, it's dark and no one's there. And it's the very first time in his life he's been the only person in a space. He's been the baby, always cared for, always fussed over. Here he is in a foreign place. He's woken up, it's dark, and there's no one he knows around. And so what's a kid to think, right? He's gone, everyone who says they love me is just waiting for me to be out of the way so they can do their thing. No one really cares about me. You don't leave valuable things on their own. You just leave worthless things on their own. So clearly I don't matter. And now you think as an adult, that's irrational. You know, the parents are probably just in the next room. Of course, they haven't abandoned him. But in his mind, all the data was clear. I have been abandoned. And therefore, I will continue to be abandoned. The people who say they love me don't really mean it. I'm moments away from being abandoned if I ever show up fully as myself. So you could imagine the raft of problems that's created through his whole life, through his relationships, his dating, his friendships, his work. Just creates such chaos. And so to examine that moment, and now anyone listening would hear that story and go, that's such an easy fix. Clearly that wasn't about him. Clearly it was just a kid having a nap. I get it. I can see how you got scared then, but it didn't say anything about your essence. You're fine. You hear any other person's story and you're going to go, that's nothing. But somehow your story has survived the test of time. No, mine's different. No, this is actually real. This actually happened to me. Like I do know the truth about me. And so you hang on to it. So for him to go back with courage and kindness and review that and rescue that little boy from this accusation he'd held against him his whole life, you are worthless, you do not deserve love, and to change his mind about that and to deeply love and accept himself and to move from being this wounded child to bringing that knowledge into his adult life. Well, just the simplicity of imagine what's possible if you could show up with nothing to prove and defend. Imagine if you could show up relaxed and at ease in your own skin going, clearly I'm a good person, clearly I deserve love. It's not up for grabs whether I perform or don't perform. It doesn't change my essence. All of a sudden now you're relaxed. Now you're capable of leadership. Now you can make tough decisions. Now you can make decisions that are good for the organisation and bad for the individual at times, for the sake of the greater good. Significant improvements in the sharpness of decision making, the quality of leadership, the clarity of communication, and the diminishment of anxiety and fear and paranoia and obsession.
Probably increases trust in you as a leader because people
Of course.
suddenly realize you're not just there to keep them happy.
You're actually leading now. They're like, this person has some strength about them now. Now I can follow. Yeah, absolutely what happened.
So you can use it as fuel, especially in younger life, and that's good. But I suspect that in a relationship, especially romantic relationships, it's a disaster.
Well, it is, because eventually 2 insecure people will suck each other dry. You're like, I need you to validate me. I need you to make me feel loved and safe. But if you've never really loved and accepted yourself, even when someone gives you love, you'll mistrust it. You're like, are you just saying that? Like, it feels good and I like it, but I don't actually believe it. And so there's this law of diminishing return. You want it, they give it, you don't believe it and receive it, you doubt it, you need it more, you show up needier and needier, which makes you less attractive, and it ends in chaos. Absolutely, the best relationships are people who can give and receive love out of the overflow of a deeply loving relationship with themselves. Now love can abide in that space, and strength and love and intimacy can grow.
Without jealousy, for example, which will quickly destroy a relationship.
Course.
Jealousy about what may be happening now and what may have happened previously.
Of course.
So you've worked across many projects. Perhaps you could share a little bit more about your first. We'll talk about Unhindered. What would you like people to take away from Unhindered? And then we'll touch on some of your other work.
Yeah, the 7 essential practices for overcoming insecurity. I don't claim to have invented the way. I discovered it, and then I modeled it, and I made that model explicit. If you could take away one thing, it would be a reiteration of this simple but profound idea that you do not know what you are afraid of. If you could If you could even chuck, if you could like, that's offensive. You're like, wait, what do you mean? Don't tell me what I do and don't know. It's like, okay, we'll try it on. What are you afraid of? Do you know? You're going to think you know the answer to that question, but you won't know the answer to that question. You'll scratch the surface and you realize, yeah, you're running and hiding. Yeah, you're proving and defending, but from what? What is this monster? You've never got close enough to see. And this is, for any parents, this is what you do instinctively with your kids. They come into your bedroom in the middle of the night, afraid of something. There's a monster under the bed. You as the parent know they're not afraid of the monster. They're afraid of the idea of the monster. They haven't actually looked. So you've separated the thing from the idea of the thing. But you've never really done that for yourself. You're afraid of a monster. Well, no, you're afraid of the idea of the monster. You've never actually had a look. You've never verified this. You've just lived as though it is true. Okay, well, if you could see that, then that might give you the courage to take the next step to go, well, what if I was to go and have a look? Maybe it's not the thing that I thought it was. And if you could then realize from the book that it's never that, it's never the thing, it's just an opinion, it's an assumption and a childhood assumption. So no child has the capacity to get it right. So everyone's assumption about themselves by the time they're 7 is faulty. Then great. Then of course you've got to go back. And why wouldn't you? Why would you not want to?
I just had this interesting thought, which is, and don't give your monster to your kids, because that can happen too.
You're going to, or even if you don't, they'll form their own. So this is a fun part of it too, because the assumption, like straight away, every person I've ever had this conversation with immediately goes to where you just went then, which is then I must prevent my child from developing insecurity. But even if you could, you wouldn't want to, because my favorite way of dialing down the angst of people is to gamify this. My favorite game story is I grew up in church youth groups, and it was a lot of games were the order of the day. And I can remember being 15 or 16, being blindfolded in the back of a ute, being driven into the national park,
Wow.
a bunch of kids in the back of the ute, and driven around for an hour, and then one by one dropped off and told, wait 5 minutes, take your blindfold off and see if you can get home. And you think, that's a very scary game. That's a very dangerous game. But it's only dangerous if you forget it's a game. Because all you got to do is think, hang on, my youth group leaders don't want to go to jail. So therefore, they probably don't, it's not in their interest if I die. So therefore, they haven't dumped me somewhere where they don't think I can return from. They actually want me to feel lost and confused. They want me to feel anxious and overwhelmed. That's the setup of this game. But they're banking on me getting myself together, climbing a tree, going to the top of a hill, and finding something familiar so I can navigate home. So that when I finally get home, the return will be so meaningful. This will be a game with stakes that I never forget. Because they haven't driven me around for an hour and dumped me in the neighbour's paddock, so that when I take the blindfold off, I can see the laundry door through the bushes. Because that would be a terrible setup. There'd be no tension to that game. And so if you think about this, everybody comes into their 20s lost and confused. No one survives their childhood without assuming there's a problem with themselves. Not a single person. And so everyone's lost and confused, but most people are wishing they weren't. Most people think that disqualifies them from a meaningful life and that the wounds of their childhood are a tragedy. No, the wounds of your childhood aren't a tragedy. That's the setup. The tragedy is if you make it through your whole life and don't even know it's a game and never use your adult skills to go back. This is the game. Yeah, you're lost and confused, but can you find your way home? That's how the game works. And if you make it home, the return will be so meaningful and so glorious to rediscover who you've always been. That's how the world gets healed. One person at a time with courage and kindness, embarking on this incredibly challenging adventure to reunite with who they've always been. So yeah, insecurity is unavoidable. You wouldn't want to pull that out of the game, and the game wouldn't work.
And it's so interesting. You said no one gets to their 20s without it. And it's true even for Justin Bieber, who was a child star. He's not healed and full and integrated at age 20. In fact, way worse than most of us.
Way worse. And the fantasy around, the perfect parent fallacy, I call it. So many people are fantasizing, if only I'd had better parents, then I would feel less lost and confused. My most insecure clients have had the best parents, because you want to get lost and confused about who you are, then get born into a family with giants. Get born into a family with beautiful, wise, strong, well-formed adult human beings. And you will not help be able to compare yourself to them. They'll know all the answers to all the questions and you'll know none of them. You'll think, how in the world am I ever going to, compare to these wonderful people? You'll always defer to their wisdom. You'll always be in their shadow. Like, you will come into your 20s so unsure of yourselves because of how wonderful your parents were. So similar, if you have absent parents, that'll be just as hard. You're better to have parents that kind of half-ass their way through, and then you kind of already assume you could do it better and you're on your way. But whatever kind of parents you get, they'll play their role and they'll confuse you about who you are, and means the game can begin. But yeah, no one survives without it, and that's the fun of it.
That is fun. That is a great perspective. So tell us about the 1 Minute Coach and some of your other work that you've done.
Yeah, well, I was a school chaplain for a couple of years at the local high school, and I had it in my mind that I could bring something meaningful on assembly, and I convinced the principal to let me do a 2-minute thought piece. And he said, be careful, Jaemin, because if it's not funny and meaningful and memorable, and these kids are going to maul you. So you sure you want to get up on assembly and have something to say? And, foolishly, I said yes, but it kind of was the proof of concept, and it kind of became the reason that all the kids came to assembly, just for Chapo's thought of the week. And so when I left there, it kind of went, this soundbite, this short idea, original ideas, useful ideas, not just adding to the noise. I wonder where else I could do this. And so I approached a radio station, and they made me pay for the privilege of doing that. But then that door then opened another door. I'm doing it here. And they're like, wow, you're doing it there. Would love you to do it here. And then all of a sudden, this station and that station and this station, until, it's being syndicated around the country. And then I'm up to 50 segments that I pre-recorded playing around the country. This 1 Minute Coach, 60 seconds, not adding to the noise, a complete idea. And then they're like, well, keep going. I'm like, what other ideas could I have? That's all I've got. And just somehow the willingness to keep thinking and to keep sharing and to keep creating content. And my wife said, you're going to have to get to 365, don't you? And I'm like, there's no way in the world. But over 5 years, eventually I created 365 content pieces, the hardest writing I've ever done, because I was inexorable about, this must be a complete idea. It must not contradict with any other idea. It must be embodied. I can't just say something because it sounds good if I haven't lived it. So every word mattered, and every idea had to make sense and be road tested in my life. So yeah, big achievement, and still plays around the country. But then eventually I created the book, and so people can get all those content pieces in one go. And it turns out it's a really great way for people to get into the space. Insecurity is such it's an offensive and confronting idea. People are insecure about being insecure. So it's a hard entry point, whereas the 1 Minute Coach, my wife made sure the cover of the book was pretty. It looks good on a coffee table or as a gift. So it's a really nice, soft entry point into this idea of dealing with your stuff and being the hero in your own story. Yeah, it stood the test of time.
Fantastic. So where can people go to find out more about you? Of course, the links will be in the show notes, but where would you like people to go?
Well, the advantage of being given a unique name is if you can work out how to spell my name, you can find me very easily. If you can, Jaemin Frazer, jaeminfrazer.com. I'm Jaemin Frazer on Instagram and Facebook and LinkedIn. If you Google insecurity, I'm not sure there's anyone else in the world who's written and spoken as much precise content about overcoming insecurity as I have in the last 15 years. So I don't think I'd be that hard to find if you're inclined to find me.
Fantastic. Any final thoughts for those who stuck with us all the way to the end?
To me, the contribution of individuals who are prepared to rescue themselves from their worst opinion, the ripple effect of what that does in the world is what motivates me the most. It is one person at a time, but when you do that, you show up differently and you influence those around you. You show them it's possible to be free from the prison people find themselves in their own heads and hearts, locked into this fear-based living. It's an extraordinary gift to give the world if you can be the hero in your own story. And that's the hero's journey. The hero always returns with the prize. They always do the thing that only the hero does, and the whole world wins. So that's what's at stake for you to overcome insecurity.
Jaemin, thank you so much. It's been a pleasure.
Thanks for having me. It's been a really enjoyable conversation.
See you all in the next episode.